We've all heard the research about the benefits of having dinner together as a family. Strengthening relationships, developing healthy eating habits. Regular family dinner has even been said to reduce substance abuse, violence, and other risky behavior in children. It sounds so cozy and idyllic. The family sitting around the table discussing their day, talking about current events, and sharing their feelings. And maybe this is what family dinner looks like at your house. I truly hope it does. But for many of us, family dinner is not a picture on a Hallmark card. 2 weeks ago, the very day I published the first episode about taking the fight out of food, I spent an hour making a delicious beef stew and salad for my family. I got it on the table, piping hot, served it up, and called them to dinner. No response. They gradually straggled in, and then a fight started about one kid wearing the other one's socks. One thing led to another, by which I mean one hand led to the other one's sock, which led to that kid falling off a chair, which led to a mom screaming, "Enough! Go to your room or go outside!" When that proved ineffectual, said mom followed said child around the room, chanting, "Go to your room or go outside! Go to your room or go outside!" while clapping and stomping in a full-blown temper tantrum of my own. It worked. The boy went to his room, but I recognized that I too needed a timeout. I grabbed my dinner, got in the car, and ate in the parking lot at the park, then went on a rage hike up and down a big hill for about an hour. When I got home, the kids were all watching TV, and the bowls of stew were still on the table, untouched. Not exactly the cozy family dinner I had pictured. This is the How She Moms podcast, where we talk about how different moms solve the same problems. I'm Whitney Archibald, a mother of 5 kids myself. I collect ideas so you can pick and choose what works for you and your family. Today's episode is part 2 of a 2-part series about how to take the fight out of food. In the first episode, we talked about picky eating and house rules about what kind of food you eat. In this episode, we're going to talk about 2 other potential battles: when kids eat and how they eat. Despite what you might surmise from the temper tantrum in the intro, I am not anti-family dinner. Most family dinners at my house are much more successful than the one I just described. But I do think it's healthy to acknowledge that there are so many hard things about family dinner. The spills, the arguments, kids who refuse to even try the food, whining, potty talk, parental lectures instead of actual conversation. The list goes on. There's a hilarious Saturday Night Live sketch about a dysfunctional family dinner with Will Ferrell, Anna Gasteyer, and Sarah Michelle Gellar, where they eat in silence except for much fork and knife clinking, with occasional and very dramatic outbursts of rage. I'll link to it, it's pretty hilarious. But joking aside, I think the magic of family dinner, the reason it has such a sacred reputation, is that it's a reason for the whole family to be together in one place at least once a day. That is something I'm heartily in favor of. If family dinner fills this role for you and works for your family, by all means, have family dinner and hold it sacred. But if family dinner is a constant source of conflict and stress, I'm giving you permission to let it go, may lightning strike me, and experiment with a different time to gather as a whole family. I had this epiphany about 10 years ago, and it was so liberating. Before that, I'd try to work dinner around my husband David's schedule so we could all eat together. That meant tiding the kids over with snacks until we ate at 7 or even 8 o'clock. This was a recipe for disaster. Family dinner was a fiasco because everyone was overly tired and hungry at that time of day. Once I realized that I didn't have to tie myself to family dinner, I started feeding my kids a good dinner right after school at about 4 o'clock, and then we'd have a bedtime snack while my husband ate his reheated dinner. This worked great for us because my kids were always hungriest right after school, and they ate their dinner so well at that time. Now that my kids are older, after-school schedules have made our dinner schedule much more erratic, changing from day to day. Sometimes we eat together, sometimes in shifts. We still usually eat before David gets home, but our nightly family devotional, where we all get together to talk about the day, read and discuss scripture, and pray together, essentially fills the same role as a traditional family dinner. Every family has the same freedom to determine their own eating schedules based on what works best for them. This summer may be the perfect time to try untethering yourself from convention and experimenting with a schedule that better fits your family. Maybe for now you feed that toddler early, spend some time together as a family as you get him ready for bed, and then enjoy a meal with your husband in peace. Maybe you eat your biggest meal at midday and then have a light supper like farmers used to do. Maybe you let dinner happen when it happens because you don't like the pressure of a strict schedule. My friend Kara Farnsworth is a dietitian. Here's a typical meal schedule at her house.
My kids are getting home off the bus at around 4:05, and we like to eat at 5. So they get off the bus and they're hungry. So our rule is they can have a snack. I let them eat a snack because so far we haven't really had an issue with them not eating dinner well. And I gauge eating dinner well as they're not looking for food rifling around the kitchen right after we've eaten, or trying to make a meal again before they go to bed, because that to me means you didn't eat food and now you're hungry again. So as long as they are still eating dinner, I'm fine with them having a snack before dinner. I mean, 2 days ago, I did have to get after my 6-year-old because he got into the bagels, and it was like, oh, I don't know, 4:45. And so I made him put back a bagel with a bite in it because he knew mom's making dinner. But it's just something that I guess enforce is the word, but that sounds really more militant than what I would like it to sound like. But no, I guess I am. I'm pretty strict about get out of the pantry. I'm making dinner. If you want me to continue cooking for you, then you have to eat the food that I cook. Otherwise, I won't cook because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And you snacking means, that you won't be hungry for my food anymore. And they're really good about it.
This summer, our family is experimenting with a French-inspired meal schedule, since I just read the book French Kids Eat Everything by Karen LeBion. The French way is to serve breakfast around 7:30, lunch at 12:30, and dinner at 7:30 with a snack around 4. And they're very strict about not snacking at other times. No crackers in your purse or, heaven forbid, your car. They don't even have snack time at school. Although this sounds super strict, it's calculated to make sure kids actually eat at mealtime. And there's still an overarching culture that food should be enjoyable, especially that afternoon snack. Here's Delphine Brandt, a friend of mine who grew up in France, explaining about French snacking habits.
And snacks are incorporated in the normal meal plan. So at 4, every little French kids have what we call a 4 heures, which is in translation means a 4 o'clock. And at 4 o'clock, it's okay to have a snack. And so usually it can be a pain au chocolat, even if it sounds like it's a pastry, but it's okay. They're going to run it. They're going to burn it off. They're going to, it's good calories. They're young. And because French people have late dinner between 7 and 8, so they understand that the kids have to have a snack at 4, where in the U.S. we eat at 5, 6. And therefore, by 8 p.m., if they're not in bed, they're hungry, and then we let them have an ice cream for a snack. And then they go to bed on that bad sugar. So different approach.
Stacy Billis, one of the hosts from the podcast Didn't I Just Feed You, also generally follows this French philosophy, whether she realizes it's French or not.
I do try to be conscientious of the times of days that my kiddos are getting sugar. Like, I don't typically serve cereal for breakfast. Occasionally I do. You'll see that on my Instagram, and my kids think it's like a big treat. But usually, like, cereal is a snack. It's an after-school snack with some milk because it can be a source of added sugar. And also, so I'm trying to make sure my kids have protein in the morning and like good fat to keep them full. But I love that strategy of sugar in the afternoon before dinner, which seems counterintuitive, but it gives them some time to burn that all off. Because we were doing dessert before bedtime, which is really like after dinner when you have young kids, right? They all get kind of smushed together. It's like dinner, dessert, bath time, bed. And there wasn't enough time for them to like burn off the energy that came from having dessert. And so we just moved dessert to the afternoon.
I love this idea of a scheduled afternoon snack, sweet or otherwise. As I record this, summer break is starting, and we've already been home with the kids for the length of a whole summer because of the COVID pandemic. And none of us knows whether double summer will turn into triple summer. Because they're home so much, the kids are constantly hungry and constantly angling for a snack. I'm embarrassed to admit this because I'm pretty sure it goes against all the rules about making food feel forbidden. But one Christmas break, I went to the hardware store and bought one of those door handles with a key code so I could lock my pantry. I was so tired of the kids filling up on snacks between meals and not being hungry at mealtimes. Plus, they made monumental messes eating snacks all over the house. I still have the lock, though I don't use it much, but I have still been known to lock it in that hour before dinner to stop them from prowling. Obviously, a better approach is to teach our children better habits and how not to just graze all day. But even this is up for debate. Some nutritionists endorse several small meals throughout the day instead of the typical 3 meals a day. So that's totally fine if you want to take that approach instead. Here's how another dietitian friend of mine, Jen Brewer, approaches bedtime snacks.
When it's bedtime and all of a sudden you're so hungry, you're going to go to bed starving, you bet. Here, you can have any of this fruit, any of the vegetables, because then if they truly are hungry, they'll eat it. And if they're not, you will find out for sure.
Another benefit of a strict meal and snack schedule is that it helps with that other battle, where kids eat, One of the things Karen Lebion, the author of French Kids Eat Everything, noticed when she moved to France is that French people thought it was absurd to eat anywhere beside the table. Part of this is because they don't snack, but part of it was just a matter of respect for the food and the home. Imagine not having to constantly remind kids not to eat in the living room or the computer room. The final battle we're going to talk about is how kids eat, table manners. My favorite idea for achieving more peace at the table is a rule from Margaret Abels, the host of one of my favorite podcasts, What Fresh Hell. In a great episode called House Rules That Work, she says,
"But the only real rule is you're not allowed to talk about the food. I don't like this. We don't talk about food."
Lauren has a sort of similar version. She says you can't complain about what's cooked for dinner at the table. But I like your sort of like don't talk about it at all.
Right. Like we just don't comment on the food because and mostly that's to stop complaining.
She also has a simple and sensible rule, no feet where we eat. Another great rule that I've heard from several moms is no phones at the dinner table, parents included. Kara Farnsworth also sticks to this good old-fashioned rule.
They are required to ask to be excused before they stand up and leave when we're eating. I mean, it's different for every time of day. Breakfast time, people are coming and going at different times. So that's more of a sit down and take care of yourself time of day, and they're not home for lunch when they're at school. But at dinner time, just last night, my 12-year-old said, "Mom, can I be excused?" And I was like, "I haven't even sat down yet." "Oh, no, I'm not ready for you to leave yet." And then he actually talked to me. So that was kind of fun. And I don't know, it might sound too controlling, and maybe we'll drop that in the future, but I like that, at least for now, that's a practice that seems to help them focus on other people at the table with them and not just them eating until they're full. You know, I'll be in a bad mood too. That's a rough time of day for me. End of day, just tried to prep a meal with a toddler biting at my ankle and a baby on my hip, right? Like I'm not a happy camper these days in this current phase by the time dinner is done and we're eating. So, but it has helped. I don't know. It just seems to slow us down enough to realize everyone is there. But I do have to make sure that I make a conscious effort to not be like, "No, you can't leave the table yet because I said so." Because that then just makes it, we dropped the practice before because it was turning into a power struggle.
Right.
But I think done in a loving way, like I'm not bragging at all, but just one success was yesterday when I did tell my son, "I haven't sat down yet. I didn't get to talk to you." Slowed him down enough to be like, "Oh, okay."
This is something I really have to try consciously to model. I don't like it when my kids are popping up and down all during dinner, but sometimes I myself am the biggest yo-yo of all, grabbing things I forgot and bustling around the kitchen instead of sitting down with everyone else. And usually by the time I get to the table, my food is ice cold. I've tried to make a better effort at getting everything on the table before we start and asking for more help from the rest of my family to make that happen. Hillary Hess is a mother of 7 children. Just imagine how chaotic mealtime could get with that number of kids. Nevertheless, she's an avid fan of family dinner. Here are some of her fun ideas to make family dinner an occasion to look forward to.
When I was a little girl, my grandmother used to always have a candle lit at dinner every night. And so we lived by her. So she would have one of us come over with her and my grandpa, and it would be like this little fancy dinner at her house. Like she'd make lamb with mint sauce or something really fancy and cute. So, and then we got to snuff the candle out with the little candle snuffer at the end. So I thought, well, maybe we should do candlelight dinners at our house. And so maybe as long as the candles are lit, everybody has to stay at the table. And it's fancy because the candles are on, so they have to have good manners. And so our deal was whoever had the best manners got to snuff out the candle at the end of the dinner. So that was really fun. It has made it a lot of fun, and it keeps them at the table. So that's not happening like on a sports night because we're running around too fast. But on a night that we don't have something else going on. So it used to be a lot, but we haven't done it for a long time. So I need to do it again because I'm noticing the wandering is happening a lot more now. So I think it's time for another candlelight dinner. We used to do a different game every month. Like for the month of November, we had a dice at the table and we would just roll it, and you had to say that many things you were grateful for, and we'd go around the table. Just simple, easy, but it had conversation at least was appropriate and not talking about bodily functions and things like that come up. I mean, at least at my table with 4 boys, and the girls are just as naughty, but yeah. And then we had one that was called Pass the Witch at Halloween. And as it got to each person, I think they had to say something nice about somebody else at the table. I think that's what it was, because you didn't want to be witchy. We weren't going to be witchy or something. So anyway, we try to do little things like that and it's not every night. It's not even always every week. We kind of go in spurts with that too. Or we'll have the talking stick, because that's another thing we run into with so many people, is that everybody's talking over each other, and that just gets loud. We'll pass that around and try to take turns. So we almost always every night ask a good and a bad of everyone at the table. So that's one thing.
I included a link to more of her table games in today's How She Moms email. If you don't subscribe yet, you can sign up at howshemoms.com so you don't miss any of the great supplements I send out. If you missed this week's email but want the link, email me at whitney@howshemoms.com and I'll send it to you. Hillary blogs about feeding and raising children and hosts the podcast A Helping of Happiness. She's also teaming up with Family Looking Up and Nikki Olson to hold an event this September called the Mom Break in Lehi, Utah. I'm going to be one of the speakers, so I'd love it if some of you can come. Of course, we now need to talk about the French take on how kids eat. Here's what Karen LeBion has to say about it. The French believe that eating is innately social. The family meal is a daily ritual that cements the bonds of French families. Now, the fact that food is social doesn't only mean that you need to eat together, it also means interacting, learning, and sharing ideas. Family meals are moments during which French children learn about the world through hearing the stories their parents tell, and where they learn important social skills, how to argue without offending someone, how to ask good questions, how to wait your turn to speak. This is why conversation is so important at French meals. They also start teaching manners much earlier than we tend to do in the U.S. Here's Delphine again.
My friends in Texas, we were in Texas, would start just spreading food on that tray on the high chair. And that, in France, as soon as they can start eating, we were already giving them a fork and a spoon and a plate. And I spent a lot of time, I would spend 2 months at a time in France when she was little. So I missed home, and it was very easy for me to travel just with her. And so it was a kind of a mixed, definitely mixed culture. And I couldn't understand that parents were throwing food like that on the tray and let the kids just fed for themselves, basically. That was difficult. So I was already trying to make her use her fork, which when you think about it, it's extremely frustrating. What you want is them to eat. Who cares if they don't master the food until they're 3, right? So choose your battle. But right. I didn't, and I did it because it was the proper way to teach your kids. And I would imagine that a pediatrician in France would advise you to just use the fork as soon as you can, where a pediatrician in the U.S. might advise differently too. Very different.
As strict as all the French rules sound, the bottom line for French eating is that it should be a pleasurable experience. Karen LeBion's final rule in French Kids Eat Everything is, eating is joyful, not stressful. Treat the food rules as habits or routines rather than strict regulations. It's fine to relax them once in a while. So this summer, we're going to be recreating Karen's French eating experiment as much as possible and see if Francifying our eating habits makes a difference for us. Whether you go French, try some of the other great ideas in this episode, or come up with some experiments of your own, here's to making food less of a battlefield and more of a delight. Thank you for listening to the How She Moms podcast. To get links to all the resources I mention in each episode, including printables and worksheets when applicable, subscribe to my weekly email at howshemoms.com. It will also include news about upcoming episodes, workshops, and events, and lists of my favorite books, podcasts, and other things. I'd also love it if you'd join the How She Moms Facebook group, where we have great discussions about upcoming topics. And you can follow me at Instagram and on Pinterest at How She Moms. Share the podcast with your friends to help our community grow. Special thanks to my mom, Susan Singley, for recording the theme music to my podcast. She played this song often as I was growing up, and to me, it's part of the soundtrack of motherhood.